Yo, what's up, team? So next feature I'm going to work on for the One Man Show app, vibe coding with Claude, is going to be a transforms module for the shaders. So haven't done it yet, but I've thought a good bit about it. I've got it on screen there, kind of what the spec might be. So yeah, so basically just want to add 5 buttons, kind of mirror the concepts that Touch Designer uses for the transforms. I also looked at Resolume and I've used that a little bit, but I just like the core shader nature of Touch Designer. So I'm going to kind of follow that idea, and then yeah, just get them in there and make it a Cortex feature that we can leverage in the perform side. So this is just for the create side. So you can kind of see that there. If yeah, if this is something that's interesting, then comment or like or whatever, and I'll see about posting the full length of how this goes. All right, so let's get into it. So we're going to take, basically what I usually do is, like I said, I write out some spec. This is from some conversation prior based on what's already in the application. And then, so it has an understanding of this leaf node, cortex nodes, etc. idea. And without digging too far into it all, we're just going to go and grab, there's some extra baggage here that doesn't really matter, but it's context so that we think about future considerations. But the goal of this is really just the 3 buttons on, or sorry, 5 rotary encoders. So if we're looking at here, so you'll see there's a conversation about other parts, these tabs, but we're just sticking with this create tab. And what I want to do is I want to get Claude to basically add a section underneath this reactivity section. And then so that section will be this transform section. So this is all about audio musicality kind of reactivity, and transforms are different, more like rotate, XY location, scale, things like that. So that's the objective here. All right, so this was V8 31, build 31. So then the HTML we'll be working off will be just the v4 _8 _ 0, which is kind of backwards how I've been doing the builds up until now, but I'm going to switch that in version 5, but it's worked well so far. So yeah, so then let's go and take this, and it just created this V8 for me in a new session based on the old 831. I know that might seem a little backwards, like it should be onto 490, but what'll actually happen is we'll use 480, which is the culmination of all those builds, and that'll be the baseline for 490. So that's what I'm going to tell it. So my instructions kind of give it some direction on what to do anyway, my Claude instructions. But let's just go with, all right, working on 4_9_0 using the deliverable from 480, O as the basis. And so it kind of knows, just tell it that first, and then Claude will be like, oh, what's next? What are we working on today? Things like that. Right, so you can see what it's doing there. And so it's like, got it, great. And then I'm also going to tell it, take a look at the V480 instruction and sys architecture updates. So instructions is pretty common in a Claude project to tell it kind of how you want to work. So I've got mine refined pretty well. You'll see some of that as we go. And then the other doc I referenced, the sys architecture doc, is in the project docs rather than the instructions, and it's very specific about the architecture, everything. Of course, that's been built over time, so I put that there as well. Those are two fundamental updates I make after every major build, not after every iteration, but after every major build. So it's taking some time to research, make sure I can find the V480 stuff, and it's found it. And so I can tell, because obviously we just did that build, that was 31 iterations or something. So I can tell that based on what it's giving me here, I know that it's giving me a summary of the right info. And so that's fine. And so then I'm just going to let it know that this is scope we worked on for the transform controls in the create tab. Take a look and then recheck any project docs and let's talk. So that way it won't just run off doing dev, and we'll put that there. So basically what's going to happen at this point is Claude's going to do its thinking. Most of the time it's pretty good. If it's having a good day, I don't know if it's because it's busy or what, but basically it'll come back with some suggestions. I always tell it, let's discuss, because I don't want it to just tear off doing dev, which it will do for sure. It's very proactive, maybe is a nice word for it. But so it's like in the recap, it's looking through all this other stuff, and then most likely it'll come back, and because of the spec, it'll most likely come back and say, step 1, let's add this these 5 rotary encoders basically underneath the reactivity area. So we'll see what it does. So it's got some questions, and it always wants to go build. So my instructions tell it not to do that, but you just got to keep repeating to it. Otherwise, it just goes crazy, and it'll do its best at creating something that'll probably be like the end result. The visual result will probably be what you want, but it won't be good code, and it won't remember to take advantage of shared controls, shared components, sort of cortex structures in your code. It'll just be a disaster. It'll end up with like renaming stuff, just kind of whatever it feels is the way to make this work the fastest, maybe the least amount of tokens, I don't know, but it's not good results usually. So it can be like instant gratification satisfying, but it's not usually the best results. So so it knows what we want to do. It's kind of gone super broad, so I'll pull it back and say let's start simple and just get the UI done on the first iteration. And it's nice to see that I don't spell well or type that great, and it'll be fine with it. So let's start simple and just get the UI done for the first iteration, meaning the 5 rotary encoders. And the thing is and they will need to be based on spec for all other encoders. Tell me the plan for that iteration, right? And so now it knows, okay, I want to pull back. I just want to work on one iteration. I just want to keep it simple. I don't want Claude working for an hour and blowing up the whole existing app, which is exactly what will happen. So you got to pull back. All right, so it knows the 5 rotary encoders and the transforms, no uniform changes yet, which means to the actual code contract for the shader. And so that'll have to get done, but it's not fundamental yet. So we'll make sure gain knobs, canvas size, that's probably fine. Draw function, yeah, that's all internal stuff it's got to do to make those controls be ready to work. Add the HTML, of course, that's going to happen. The CSS, the JS, that's fine. And then before it goes, I'm going to ask it, so does this set us up in the UI for the changes we will need to make in the universal shader GLSL contracts? I said that backwards, but it'll get it. And then hit it, let it go. So again, it's going to think, and it's definitely more fun to just let it blast, but you won't get good results. And what you might get is good results for like 6-7 iterations, and then you'll hit a block where Claude just doesn't know what to do, and you'll have to basically backtrack maybe to the beginning, because it'll get so confused with what's been done. So it's just, in my opinion, super important. What's worked for me is like doing it like this, where you kind of broadly tell it what you want to do, let it go nuts, but don't dev. And then you can see that it's just all over the place. And then you kind of reel it back based on your knowledge of the application so far. Right. So yes, the encoders feed the control states, which then feed the uniform buffer, which goes to the shader. Great. So it knows what we're doing. And then the last thing I'm going to ask it is, okay, do we see any conflicts with anything in the create tab so far, or future problems in the perform tab? And this just makes it go think, and saves you from having to do a lot of technical spec. And so, Claude will go look at all the code. It'll look at the tab specifically first, the create tab in this case, and then it'll go check out the other tabs. It'll kind of wander around and run its grep tools and stuff, and that's all fine. But the real thing, in my opinion, is just like being open with Claude, so that it doesn't sort of shut down, because it'll kind of shut down and kind of do nothing except exactly what you tell it, literally to the point where you have to start telling it code decisions, and that's not the point here. So it's like asking it all these questions, letting it come with all this information with kind of a focus, and then drilling it down into what you want it to do. That's worked real well for me. All right, so it's thinking through stuff, no conflicts on the create tab, and then and then this is fine. Perform tab, future considerations, no problems. And then the last thing I'm going to ask it is, okay, one more thing. Can we take a look at any duplicity? I don't even know if that's a word, but I use it all the time with it, and it seems to work. I.e., code, CSS, etc. Keep the leaf diagram and core text in mind. So those are terms that I learned from watching videos on the Anthropic website in terms of how to get Claude to work better. And so we went through and defined this leaf diagram. It's part of that system architecture document. And so it should know what this means, and you'll see in the response. And so what I'm wanting it to do is go look at that system architect doc, and I didn't even say that specifically, but it'll figure it out because it's the only document in the project documents. And so it'll most likely figure it out. It'll go, see, yeah, so it knows, okay, you're right. It's like, yeah, good call, bringing me back to planet Earth here. Let me go check the HTML you gave me. Let me check the document, and then, kind of present anything that it was planning to do that might be duplicity, like, it'll replicate controls, it'll replicate variables, all kinds of stuff, and it still does it even if you tell it not to. But like not every full version, but like not every subversion, but on a full version, like when we go to 5.0, so we're close. I'll take the beginning of the 5.0, which maybe I'll do later, and just show kind of going through, asking all these questions with the only focus in mind being refactoring and just hunting for stuff that's basically slop. You probably, from a coder, from a really high quality developer's perspective, they could probably always find slop, whether humans did it or Claude AI does it or whatever. But you can mitigate a lot of that and save yourself a ton of aggregate headaches in the future by just kind of at least reminding it like what that you want professional quality, even if it's a DIY project for yourself like this is. All right, so, it found some things that exist, minor inconsistency, not a blocker. Yeah, there's some CSS stuff, not a big deal. Some JavaScript stuff, multiple nearly identical draw functions, right? So it's got, there's stuff from the live tab and then some from the create tab, right? So they all draw the same pattern. Maybe we come back and they're working now. But it's some duplicate stuff, and so we'll maybe have to come back and do that. So safe to consolidate some of that. So at this point I have a choice if I want to consolidate them first or if I just want to go create this new thing. And I kind of want to move on to create this new thing just to see what it looks like. So and so I'll just say, yeah, that makes sense. And then when we clean this up later, we can check the rest. And so after this is working, we will do a quick MD, that's the Markdown docs, that I can add to my PM chat. So I have a product management chat for backlog items and all that kind of stuff, planning, sprint planning kind of stuff. And so that's what that's all about. So it should know what that means based on my instructions. And then let's do some code, or let it do some code. I'm not doing anything. Yeah, so it likes that. And then, yeah, so let's do it. Okay, so give me the iterations in chunks that we can build on. All right, so it's going to do that, and then we're going to let it rip. Right, so now it's giving me, it wants to call them chunks, iterations, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And it's it's gone through an old instruction picking up using A there. We're not doing that anymore, but I'll fix that before I let it go. So chunk 1, this part, yeah, so we'll do that. So I'll say, okay, go with iteration 1, give me clear details first, and by the way, read the instructions. We don't use letters anymore. It will be, and you have to do this sometimes in the first part of a new dev chat. Even though it's in the project, it just does whatever it wants sometimes. So if I tell it specifically v4 underscore 9 underscore 01, from here on it'll realize, oh yeah, I didn't follow your instructions. All right, so it's doing its thing, realizing its lack of instruction following. Sometimes it'll say sorry. Anyway, got it. So it knows this is the first iteration. Let me check current HTML structure, blah blah blah, and it may or may not just take off on its own. But it's okay if it starts doing dev. I won't stop it because I know that it's going to just stick to this chunk, most likely. You never know, but most likely it'll stick to that chunk. And based on looking at, excuse me, that, it could probably do all three of those chunks together, but I'm kind of just going to go excruciatingly focused and careful here. All right, so it's checking stuff. Yeah, so it's going to cooperate with me. It's going to give me a nice clean update. It's going to show me some HTML. HTML is about the only thing that I know how to code at all. So I have to rely on it for all the JS and everything else. But what I do give it input on is like, if it goes to like start naming stuff crazy, I'll kind of jump in and be like, no, we got to go back to our naming standard. Super important stuff, because otherwise you just get aggregate spaghetti and meatballs. IDs for control states. Maybe that's okay. Let me see. So I'll ask it, as far as naming goes, is this in line with our established naming conventions? And so it'll take a look on the create tab at a minimum, and it'll kind of decide if we've got some other patterns for naming that it should propose or use, or if it's just missing altogether. And you could kind of do any of these things in any order, but, well, maybe not any order, but this is just kind of things that pop into my head because I've been doing this so much. But I've done years of software development prior to this too, software product management. All right, so it comes up and says, okay, here's your existing pattern. Same basic naming and whatever. Issues with my proposal, mixed, short, long. So transform, rotation knob, transform, rotation. I like the long names better. That's what we've typically been using. It doesn't have any effect really on code in this scenario. And so, okay, so canvas IDs. All right, so it's going to ask some questions. That all looks fine. Let's do some canvas ID questions. Display spans, should we skip them and use hover over messages like gain? Oh, it's because we have this message bar. This message bar at the bottom, I use it kind of like the Ableton Live does with their additional information concept that they use on the bottom left. So skip the spans, show message. I'm just going to say, yeah, prefer that we stick to the pattern of mouse over shows keyboard or shows basic use function and keyboard shortcuts. Then the message states 3 we have are used per spec. Are you clear? If you don't say are you clear or ask it a question, it may just tear off doing dev, and then you can stop it, pause it, and interrupt it in the middle, and it'll listen to what you say. But once it starts doing that, then it tends to start getting more confused and harder for it to pick back up on things. So here we go. All right, so let's see what it did. It came up with so ready to build, yes, go. But since I don't want to read through that HTML and scroll and all, and I wouldn't get the whole context anyway, I'm going to ask it again. Please recap the plan. I'm not an HTML guru. Right? So yeah, so it's showing me this is kind of how these already exist. You can see the mod rows here for reactivity, and then the transforms will go below that, and then this iteration is just that. All right, so then we'll go back and put the draws on and the interaction stuff. Yes, go. So that yes, go, it doesn't always do. Well, it does for me because I put it in my instructions. So we'll see what it does. And let's see how well it does with my my instructions in terms of giving me. I always ask it to give me a build for the HTML file as well as a notes file in a MD format. That's been working well the whole time. Sometimes it forgets to name them, but generally it's pretty good. The simpler I made the instructions, my instructions are really reduced to like project management, product management, naming schemes, basically how to work together. It took me a while to kind of sort out that those instructions don't need to include much else. We do have a summary in the instructions of what the app is and what DJing and music performance, digital music performance is, both visual and audio, so that it can contextually understand like what we're doing. If you don't do something like that, it'll just tear off thinking you're creating a grocery store, logistics app or something. If you wanted to use names like of your app and proper all that stuff, then you got to get that in the instructions or it'll just tear off creating whatever. Or worse, it'll ask you to give it, like the old HTML or some massive document explaining everything, and then you'll put it in the chat will token out, and that sucks. All right, so it's got it. Yeah, here we go with notes. It didn't comply. So I'm going to make it comply. Please name the notes file better per Claude instructions. This is mostly for example, but I would do this anyway because I don't like my notes files just saying notes, because then you end up with 40 iterations and they all just say notes. You have no clue what happened inside them. So at least the main thing that you're doing, I like it to do. All right, so it should go back and do that. Sometimes it'll tell me, no, that's not going to work. Yeah, it didn't like it. It actually choked. It spit back my instructions, so I'm going to do it again. Sometimes that'll happen with connectivity issues and stuff. There we go. So it found it. It went looking in the instructions and it found my spec the way I want things named. And then, like I said, it just seems to need some coercing in the beginning or some nudging to go read those instructions. It just never seems to read them right off. But it should get it straight from here on, right? So, okay, so now we got just this transforms UI HTML. So we'll download these two files. And then I'll go over here to downloads, and then you can see it there. And so we'll open that. And here we are on this. And so it put in the section, but pretty typical. It missed, exactly what was in my head. I might not have prompted it well enough, but these are easy things to fix. So what I'll do is I'll tell it, I'll just do a screenshot actually. In this case, just this section, because I don't need to be too crazy. But I'll get the build number in there. It's always useful in the screenshots. And then it'll know to look at that transform section. So what I really want, I think, I want this to be like, shader controls is this whole thing. So I don't want this blue to be like that, because output is just totally different. That's related to output. So I want these to stay light gray. So I'm going to need to tell it that, and I didn't think about that in the beginning. All right, so I'll say pretty good, thanks. It seems to just work better when you're nice to it. All right, so pretty good, thanks. Take a look at the screenshot, and I'd like the header to be in line with the other shader controls like reactivity. And so it'll fix that, and also tell me what else you will do from iteration 02 first. So we wanted to do all this together. So obviously this is easier when you've already got a bunch of iterations working with it, clearly. But the UI stuff as well, and you can, there's a bunch of ways to tell it more specifically what to do in the UI, but I just forgot. And so it's pretty good at seeing a screenshot and then scoping out the piece based on the names. Right, so it knows what I want to do and switch that. And then now the plan is going to be just to fix that header style. And then it's going to go ahead and add this this init transform encoders function, and then so the knobs will display proper styling, correct default positions, header matches other sections, right? So it'll all be lined up. So that's good. I'm going to go yes, go. So it may not be totally obvious, but all that kind of what might seem boring at the beginning of this chat that we did, and making sure the instructions are updated, making sure the systems architecture is updated for easy reference without confusing it. And just that maybe 10, 15 messages back and forth prepping in this chat will it seems to save me tons of time as we get going. We'll get faster and faster going through this particular 480 bunch of iterations or 490, sorry. Yeah, it's just the way it works. I can't explain it. I don't even know if Anthropic people can explain it. I'm sure someone can explain it. Knock yourselves out. Tell me why. All I know is it works. And while that's doing that, maybe I'll rename this to be OMS beta 4.9.0 builds. I'll do that I'll just do part 1. That might be all we need. Sometimes, depending on how Claude feels that day, it might token out, might not. If you don't put too many screenshots, full screenshots, if you don't add a bunch of HTML reference files from other stuff, if you don't add a bunch of big file uploads into the chat, it tends to be able to get, at least for what I'm doing, it'll get 30, 40 iterations with no problem. They added a new compression feature in there, or at least it just started showing up for me. I don't know how new it is, but maybe a week or two ago, they added this thing where when the chat starts tokening out, it'll do this compression pause, and it seems to expunge a bunch of stuff maybe that's been static in the more recent part of the conversation. No idea how it actually works. I just know it works. And so I've found a balance with being able to get about 30 to 40 iterations in a subdivision, a sub build, like going between 4.8 and 4.9. Yeah, so just watch it turn, and then, now you can see it's done some things better. File naming for sure. It's like right on point now. It's not like screwing around. It's giving me little test instructions on what to do. I may or may not do them just because I know where this is headed, so may not be the right choice yet. We'll open this guy up, see how it did. So it did put the transforms thing. A little messy with the labels here. You can see I don't even have any labels on anything here, so I'm going to get it to remove those. It did not put any of the mouse over tooltips. Maybe that was going to be next, but we'll give it another screenshot and have it fix some of those things up first before we move on to more features. So I'd like a frame kind of like basically like this. It might end up having to be like this shader controls outer box, but I'd like that kind of area so these aren't just floating in outer space here. And by removing these labels and having it put the mouse overs, which has kind of been my standard throughout, it will, all those things will line up in that flex or flex layout. So let's go try to fix that stuff. Okay, moving, let's focus on fixing the layout before anything else. I'd like to remove the encoder labels. We don't use them anywhere else, and just add the context tips plus keyboard shortcuts, and then the message bar variations. Recap first. So we'll get this dialed in. Since I don't do any kind of real serious code like C, or Ruby, or really anything other than like HTML, like I said, some CSS, I tend to start with the UI. All the projects I've worked on over the years, people have their preferences. Sometimes people are working on both, but since I'm kind of one-man showing it here, no pun intended, I just find it's worked well to get that layout precise first, without anything really going on behind it. It's almost like doing the proto, from the design, like using Figma or something, and then kind of faking how it's going to work to show to people, and then you come back and link it up and do all the code. I've had good success with that, both with development teams as well as with Claude. So I'm just kind of sticking to that pattern. All right, so result 5 hover, drag, find, yeah, mouse leave, yeah. And so I just want to make sure it's using our universal component. Want to confirm you are using our universal message bar component. anytime you put a question mark, it's good because it'll stop it. Even if you don't say, stop before dev, it'll take a question mark as giving you an answer. It'll go verify, it'll come back. And then, of course, it's going to want to develop immediately, regardless of its answer. But at least it won't tear off developing. Yeah, good. So we have a Cortex function. I'll maybe talk about that in another video sometime. But in that leaf diagram that I talked to you about, we have a Cortex is Cortex, most important things, and we have a messaging bus in there that's used for all throughout the whole entire application to populate that message bar down here. All right, so let's see, ready to go? Yeah, I like that. Let's go. Yes, go. Yeah, so we'll take a look at what's going to happen here. Yeah, so it's digging a little deeper, which, a lot of times is good. Like, you want instant gratification, but watching that dialogue, like, I kind of am used to the way it rolls through things, and so it makes me more confident, especially on a small iteration like this. It makes me way more confident that it's going to be successful. And if anybody knows any way to get Claude to do more without problems or errors or just blowing up the application, I'd love to hear about it. But I don't always have to go this small in the iterations. I'm taking this one super easy because this create tab is basically done with the exception of this transforms piece. So I don't want it to blow up the thing and go rewrite a whole section, which I've had it do before. I'm sure it's my fault, from my prompts or whatever, but these micro iterations are definitely helping to keep it clean. And I actually learn a lot more too, because I can just watch a lot more, and I'm a pretty visual person. So even though I'm pretty technical, like I still, even visual text, like watching all this, like I kind of can repeat this stuff in my sleep now, as far as the Claude process and how it, the patterns it goes through to do code. Test it, document it, all that stuff. All right, so let's see what it did. So it's going to want me to, open it, obviously, hover, check those things. It looks like it's already tried to assign the patterns we've used for other rotary encoder knobs, which, by the way, a lot of that was based from my experience in the music world, based on MIDI fighter twisters. They have these rotary encoders that are also buttons. They're like endless encoders with buttons. So I love those things, and that's pretty much what everything's been modeled after here. All right, so let's just see what it did. I like the file HTML build name. I like the notes name, and let's go check it out. Yeah, so it didn't get the surround around it, but let's see if it got my. Yeah, so it looks like it also didn't get the mouse over on the actual mouse. They are working now, which is cool, and you can see the readout. So real quick, so you can see in the bottom message bar that's down here, this is what I was talking about. I don't have everything working this way yet, but a lot of things I do, because I don't like tooltips in general. They get too lengthy and they're crazy to manage from a centralized perspective to me. Maybe it's just the way my mind works, but you can see here what I liked is having this mouse over show me what it can do, which would normally be a tooltip, and it looks like it did that, so maybe it's leaving them out now, just intuitively, which I'm fine with. For me personally, and especially when I get into any kind of live performance, which is the driver behind a lot of this, I don't like looking at the button because I'm not using the buttons. So I wanted this kind of thing, because if I'm working with an external controller, right, here, like a MIDI fighter, if I'm working with something like this and it's mapped, there's no tooltips, right? So it's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. and that's the ultimate objective, right? So that's why it's doing this, right? So if I touched that, for example, on the MIDI fighter, I can also have a way, through the way the MIDI fighter is configured, to display this down here. And then when you're performing, at least for me, if I'm looking at messages from something, I want my eyes always in the same spot. I don't want to have to be looking all over the software interface, all over the computer. There's a whole bunch of pros and cons around that. But for this, you can see, and it's doing perfect. It's changing and showing the value. I have it changing to orange to do that. Those are the standards in our centralized message bus. Yeah. And so all that looks good. So the only thing I don't like here is that two things. I don't like this scroll up and down. The reason I have this screen in this size is because it's precisely fit to my MacBook Pro 14-inch. And while I could expand this to the whole, I'm working on a big monitor at the moment and a side monitor to record the video. But so I could have, obviously I can expand this app. I don't have it responsive specifically because it would expand to the whole 23-inch or whatever, but it'll still stay the same size in the middle. And I have it that way for now because I don't want it on the MacBook Pro to do anything different at all. And since this is an HTML app, my controls for that are kind of different than had I built this using like a desktop-based technology versus the browser-based technology. And so this was my precaution just to make sure I'm boxed in. In the future, I could unleash it maybe if I need to, but it's really purpose-built. So it actually simplifies a lot of things by making it do exactly what you want to do for you. All right, cool. So that's that. But I still want this box around it. So I want to work on this and see if I can get it to do this box for me before we move on to doing more back-end code and modifying. So let's see if it will do something for me. Okay, cool. All working. Only omission is the quote-unquote module outline for the 5 knobs. They are just floating on the black background. I'd like them to have a border and infill like the other CSS patterns, so that it all looks modular. So you might think, someone who's used Claude a lot might also ask like, oh, I forgot to put the screenshot. So here's a good example. You can stop it and interrupt it and it won't lose context. And then I can do that and let it go again. Well, it looks like it actually did lose my text. That's abnormal, but let's see what it says to my screenshot. I'm gonna have to type that again. All works fine, but before we link up, I want to get a border and infill around the 5 buttons so they look modular in the overall layout ideas. You could even just put question marks. 1, 2, 3 question marks, and it'll stop it from going off and doing a bunch of dev. See there, so it knows, right, what I'm trying to get at. And like a normal UI designer would intuitively have already looked at the rest of this and probably done that on their own. So this is one of those things where Claude, if you don't give it excruciatingly long instructions, which then tend to confuse it with real Cortex technical issues, it won't think ahead. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But let's see. So, it's got a bunch clean module look without being too flashy. The dark fill creates depth. I don't like any of that. It's not paying attention to the other stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go, because I know that this version has these other tabs. So I know that, let's say, utilities there. Let's do settings. And I'll just say like I'll even go I'll just show like the actual HTML for this. This will make it easier for Claude, and I'll just be like, hey, we'll screenshot this. I get that version number in there so it knows where it came from, and then I'll kind of go over to there. And with this, it'll be way more precise. So I'll just do like, hey, I don't understand all of that, but what I think makes sense based on existing is something like this. And then I'll just paste the screenshot. When screenshots have a lot of text in them, especially when it's showing specific components, or whether it's CSS or whatever in the code, messages, blah, 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 it can definitely parse out text 100%. I've never had any problems with it parsing out text from an image. But subjective things like, hey, look at the rest of the controls, I want it like that, like it obviously didn't really get what I was trying to do there. Now it will, most likely. It'll probably be like, got it. I see you're pointing at existing box styling. Right. So now it's going to go check that, which is always a benefit of having put the part of the application code or the whole thing, if it's small enough, in the chat. You'll just have to gauge that by ear. Yeah, so it's like found an existing pattern, and so it'll be like, yeah, give it a try. Yes, go. Let's just see what happens. Even though those are standards that are heavily documented in our systems architecture document and developer documentation, which are in the Claude project, like I can tell you, I can guarantee you 100% those specific points about the CSS styling exist, but it just doesn't keep all that in memory. My understanding is something to do with, the token use and all that, which totally makes sense. So I'd rather it keep moving and have it feel a little bit more like a dialogue, and that kind of leaves it open as well to like, you don't just let it rip so much, you kind of micromanage it a bit, I guess is the way to look at it. And then that way, if something really actually shouldn't be in line with all the standards, you don't waste time creating it all and then being like, oh, that's not what I meant, and going back. So, but let's see if that was a good example on using existing HTML component to get it to make this more like I want it. All right, so it'll always refresh that on the right first and then cruise here. So let's see if it did it or not. You can actually see some things in the preview. You can't see all the things, and I don't want to expand it right now because it'll go off the video I'm recording. But, and no, I don't want to use OBS. Let's see. Yeah, so this is what I wanted it to do. To me, it looks pretty cool. Looks like I wanted it. Everything's nice and spaced, and now you've got this nice divide. I actually want to do this up here too. I tried doing this yesterday, but like 5 iterations we worked on it, and it just couldn't. I couldn't communicate to it maybe like as simply as I just did. It's a great example what I just did, so it immediately got that versus all this other stuff it was going to do. I tried this on these 5 buttons because they're kind of misaligned still. They're sort of floating, and I don't like that. I couldn't get it to do it for the life of me yesterday. So hopefully when I go back, I'll be able to use this now as the example, and it'll get it done. All right, so we kind of know this is already fixed. So I'm just going to download the build and then move on. Okay, good. What is next in the overall mission for transforms? So let's see. We're almost at about 50 minutes on this video in total. So let's see if I can get it to turbo and wrap this by the end of the hour. I'm skeptical, but all right. So it recaps what we got. Great. Remaining. So we need to do the control states wiring, the uniform struct expansion. I think that should probably go next because there's a bunch. I'm going to see if it thinks it can do all these together. Control states wiring? Okay. Yeah, let's do 05. Go. I'm just going to wing it. in the earlier days, like say back V1, V2, V3, when I was really learning a lot more about how Claude works and dialing in my instructions and necessary and not necessary documents for it to work from, I would just cause all kinds of problems with the UI blowing up and everything. But so what I started doing was I started like not every iteration, but maybe every 2 or 3, I would fully test the audio, all the tabs, and it takes a long time, right? Like you would kind of do in a normal dev world. But I was like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense in the context of getting value out of Claude. You got to speed that iteration up, right? So a lot of this like micro stuff is just ways I've learned to work with it so that I can get it to not run off chasing, like, I guess when it goes through code, sometimes it'll just see something that's like in a totally unrelated section, like audio controls. You can see, right? We're doing nothing to do with audio controls, but it would just run off and go change something there, and it would like break the whole thing. Or like the shader output, which you can't see on this screen, it's just over here to the right. It would just go do some commenting on something and then it wouldn't render anymore, stuff like that. So this micro stuff has helped me have a lot less feature breaks as we go. And from my experience with regular developer teams, especially the 24/7 aspect, I mean, all these issues I'm not going to get into right now, but from my experience, like you're still way faster. I'm way faster by myself doing this particular type of project. All right, so it's done that. I don't know if there's, let's see, adjust transform knobs, not about values. So what's a test? Save to library, change knobs, different values. Yeah, I'm not totally worried about that stuff. Let's see, I need the DL, the MD. I'll open it just to see if it looks right, but I don't have a lot of concern. I don't think we have any keyboard controls on this. I wonder if we put Shift R on the reactivity. I don't know if it did Shift T by any chance for transform controls. It did not. Okay, so that's fine. Let me ask it to do that real quick. Well, it said it had some shortcuts. Sorry, I didn't pay attention earlier. Rotation, I can drag. Yeah, but I want. Yeah, that's fine. So that was fine what it did. Let's go. Hey, let's take a quick backtrack. Can we get the transform controls to work like the reactivity controls with the keyboard, i.e. Shift plus R gets you in the grid, and then there is arrow, nav, etc. Can we do that with Shift plus T, and do you see any conflicts? I want to do that like I did the Shift R. It works great so that it focuses the keyboard on that section, and then you can hop around it really easily. And so the example would be you want to do reactivity, Shift R, you're in the grid, you can tab all around like a spreadsheet, and the same thing with transforms, even though there's not more, but there might be more in the future. So we're gonna leave this like that. Yeah, so it forgot, and it'll make you feel good when it can and be like, good idea, you're a coder, even though you're not. All right, so create tab, transform mode. Conflict found. Shift T is used in live tab for track grid toggling. Shift R is not. So, okay, well, so that's fine. Maybe, I'm not sure that I like the, yeah, that's true. It's got Shift T, Shift W, Shift R. Let me look at that real quick. Okay, yeah, so the MTW. Okay, we'll fix that later. Those aren't used a lot, so we'll fix that later. Let's use it here, and we will fix that when we go to perform tab, because those are way less frequent. Right, and so we're going to do plan. All right, let's go down to, yeah, so it likes that, it's fine. Yep, that's all. This is all stuff that's a pattern we've already established for other things. And you got to think of everything with Claude. Like, it'll go for something, but if you just say, like, do keyboard shortcuts, I don't even know what logic it uses. It'll give you something, but it'll be, like, wild. So you got to make sure you get real specific with what it's going to do. Yeah, so that's all fine. Messages, fine. Pattern, same as Shift R, but single row, no up, down needed. Conflict note, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go. All right, so now we'll end up with a keyboard and hopefully still mouse. Hopefully it doesn't delete the mouse bits, but it might. But we'll do the keyboard controls and we'll just check those and see what we got. So I'm going to close these tabs that had the other builds. I'll leave my, oops, that was not what I thought it was, but that's okay. All right, and then we'll go back here and then let's go back and see how it's doing on the build. All right, so 56 minutes. Let's see where we get. I don't really have like a, what are those tomato clock timers? I don't really have anything like that around, but I am kind of an on the grid kind of person in terms of like math grids. So I definitely think in terms of like, ooh, an hour is coming up. I need to get something done. But this will be iteration 5. We'll have maybe 6, 7. It might take up to 10 to actually get this thing to work. But like I said, we'll be going on to other things anyway with, 20, 30 at least iterations under this 490. So that won't all be in this video, but I would like to get this one piece wrapped. Beautiful Saturday. I went out. I got a swim. It's been my latest thing. I got a kilometer in. Even though I'm American, I have no idea what the kilometer is in miles. If anyone from outside the U.S. is watching, you can do that kilometer conversion for me real quick. Thanks, brah. All right. Well, I always check here first. Just, if I can see it, I'll check the layout. Looks like it didn't crush anything. That seems to be working. I don't think the Shift T will work. Oh, it did. It worked in here. Sometimes you have to go to the actual app load rather than the display on the side here. But yeah, that's working. And then, of course, up, down doesn't do, up, down actually moves the whole panel. I'm going to fix that here in a second, too. And then hold Shift, and it is rotating. And then scale. And I've got these on kind of a logarithmic thing. You hold the button, they go faster. That's working out pretty well for me. Not my favorite thing, but just looking for ideas on how to do these. I mean, you can increment one at a time too, but I like my increments super tiny so I can have plenty of resolution between 0 and 1, basically. Everything, Claude, for whatever reason, part of the reason I took all the labels off and all the readout labels that would normally kind of be on a UI maybe, I took them all off because a lot of them don't make sense the way Claude wants to do it. Like, it wants to just kind of have everything on a 0 to 1 base. And after listening to a lot of its rationale, like, it does kind of make sense, like, even though it doesn't totally make sense to like a music person, because you like might expect the volume knob, for example, to go up to 0 dB and then maybe up to 6 dB past and clipping and stuff, and then all this kind of stuff. On those, I got it to do it. I won my use case. But on these other things, basically what was happening was it was just like, if I wanted this to be like 0 to 10, just so it would go like 0.1 increments, would be 100 increments. It just made more sense to me. And it just didn't want to do it because what it was doing is it would have the knob be 0 to 10, and then it was in the code running this conversion, and it just got all messy. And so it was just way easier to just be like, all right, fine, Claude, just 0 to 1 it, take off the labels, let's do this message bus system. That's kind of how some of that stuff evolved. All right, getting back on track with this, so that the Shift T works fine. Oh, and it was smart enough to think, hey, because we did this before, just isolate it to the Create tab for now. So when we go to implement this stuff in the Perform tab, we've got some ideas there for a later date. It won't work anyway, and that'll kind of remind us to make it better. All right, so let me just download those. I don't really think I need to check anything. Yeah, so it looks like it works. Let me check one thing though. So escape gets you out of it. Shift T gets you in it. Shift T gets you out. Perfect. That works just like reactivity. I'll show you reactivity real quick. Boom. You can get all around in there. These are sweet controls for changing drop-down values, doing this kind of stuff. Those other knobs are grayed out because there's no audio on this yet. And the Shift R can get you out of there. Great. That all works fast. I like it. What's next? Maybe I'll speed this thing up to get it within an hour. We just went over an hour, so maybe I'll just... if I do post this full version, I'll probably just do a edit in Blender. I use Blender for most of my visual stuff, so I'll just Blender 5 Suite. They did some nice enhancements to the video editor, so I haven't really worked with it much yet in 5, so maybe I'll do this video in there and use its time stretch controls to shrink it a bit. All right, so transforms progress, great. Remaining GPU side, uniform structure, right, uniform buffer, fine, shader contract, fine. Okay, so let's just do 07. And a lot of times if I don't really know what it's doing, because now it's getting into code and I'm not going to really do much other than watch it and see if it works, because we've already agreed on naming conventions and things that are definitely important to me. I'll just ask it risk of doing multiple iterations, and I don't know if it's meaningful or not, but most of the time if it comes back and says low risk, mid risk, super high risk, like with what it's about to do, high risk is usually Cortex stuff, and then the leaf diagram we have in our sys architecture helps us kind of have a communication line, and Claude's partly basing it on that with the risk assessment. So it's going to be like, combine those two, tightly coupled anyway, should do together in one iteration, medium, multiple touch points, but all related, fine. Okay, so, and then I'm going to go ahead and ask it again, any duplicity code warnings here. I love that I can just do I actually type rather than hunt and peck, but it's terrible, so I'm glad I can do that, and Claude is smart enough to figure out what the heck I'm trying to say. Yeah, so good idea to check this duplicity thing and just make sure we don't have any problems. We'll probably check the naming one more time. Naming pattern check as well. These are things I ask it a lot. I could probably put those in the instructions, but I don't mind chatting back and forth on these. Let's see. Yeah. Wow, we already know there was some duplicity in this. Like I know already, because this shader rendering was the last thing we got to, and then upgrading the shader contract and all this stuff. So I'm aware there's like these 4 or 5 areas. Yeah, with careful tracking, note the refactor for future. Yeah, I like that. Okay, makes sense. I'll want an MD specific to that future refactor. For docs, please double check naming patterns before we go. All right, and so let's see what it does. I'm cheering for you, Claude. The other reason I do about an hour is because I need to stand up and stretch. I have a sit-stand desk, but we're just going to sit for this one. All right. So I think it's probably okay. Didn't we already agree on this? It'll go back through the chat, be like, oh wait, you're right, we did already agree on this. So basically I asked it the same question about naming again, and it's come back with an answer as if it forgot before. It'll probably go find it in this chat and be like, oh yeah, right, we already did that. Yeah. And it might even get confused. I meant in this chat, didn't we agree on naming? I think long was the agreement. All right, so, man, I'm getting hungry. Yeah, see there? Right. Okay, great. But that's all right. So there's just some double checking, blah, 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 cruising around. Yeah. Great. So that helps me just confirm that it's very clear on my concern with that naming issue. And we'll do yes, go. If you haven't built a lot of software without AI, you may not know this kind of stuff ends up happening in the background. But the idea of critical components, nodes, and prioritization of what's critical and not on out to the UI is pretty important, because you'll have certain things that, because of that Anthropic video I watched, and one of the Anthropic staff was talking about this leaf nodes thing is something Claude can really understand. I had never really used that so much in that context, certainly not with AI, in any software development prior. For product management, but made sense. I gave it a try, and Claude seems to understand it. So for some reason, it clearly understands that versus other sort of product management commonalities that I had experience with in the past. So anyway, we did that, and it seems to really understand, Cortex stuff. It like pays double, triple extra attention, partly because that's in my instructions. But those kind of things, while this is running, those kind of things would be like, like an audio timing system, a visual timing system. It would be like the centralized messaging component that may not seem all that critical, but we don't want, UI specific instances of how those things work. We don't want instances in different tabs of how those messaging buses basically work, right? So since I didn't have like I said, since I don't have a lot of experience on the core code side of that, but I do know how important it is, and so I just really insisted that we work on this, we being Claude and I, to establish certain things. So it's gotten pretty good at spotting some of those things sometimes where we made mistakes earlier on before I realized, like, Claude just kind of codes whatever. It seems to code like putting out a fire. It seems to code whatever it is you want, no matter how small or how big. It seems to just code it with its path of least resistance. It almost never naturally looks at the overall concept of the project. Certainly not domain knowledge. Certainly not like design standards. It just almost never looks at that stuff. It just, for whatever reason, seems to just push forward with maybe whatever is the least resource usage. I don't know. But I am using the $100 a month, like pro one. I ended up ultimately having to do that because I just couldn't get it to do enough things the way I wanted it to do it on the pro, I think, is like the basic $20 a month plan. But it's well worth it, It's super cruising now. I tried the $200 one, which is basically pro with more resource usage. I tried it for a month, but turned out that I just didn't understand how to work with Claude. So I did a whole bunch of like understanding from mostly the Anthropic YouTube channel to try to understand how to better work with it, you know, to get lean and mean apps. And then it worked. So I was able to, you know, stop all the token timeouts and all these other crazy things, and just be way more efficient. You know, I had to do my part, basically learn how to, what other people were getting Claude motivated as if it's a human, but getting it to work and all that stuff. So yeah, so this is going to run, and my video is kind of going to come up on an hour and 10 minutes. So I want to keep this one under an hour. So I'll probably stop this one and then maybe start another one. And there'll have to be a part 2 to getting this this all working. Okay. Awesome. So hope that was useful. There's all kinds of things you could probably garner from this. Not like the output of my transform controls was really had anyone hanging on the edge of their seat anyway. So it's probably more just working with Claude, hopefully useful, or, you know, if everything I've done is stupid, since this is new to a lot of people anyway, feel free to comment on, you know, ways things could get improved and whatnot. All right. Peace out and see you in the next one.